I was coordinating one very important project for digital transformation for CIO. You know, CIO are large companies in France, and this project duration is roughly 5 years, so it ended up in 2016. And basically, the idea is how should companies organize by 2020? So, and taking into account different things, including digital, but not only digital, the way society innovate, the geopolitical aspect, regulation, and so on and so on. So that's the background for this presentation. Although I have also several materials on intangible and digital, but maybe to start with why this topic for me is very important. There are different arguments for that. Of course, intangible are an important source of growth and innovation, whatever the context. Uh, there is one argument for that, at least because half the investment of firms is of intangible, and also because socioeconomic. I think basically, if you take the economic analysis, there are many work actually done on the importance of intangible for growth and innovation. But the most important thing for me is the importance of intangible in what is emerging, what is the emerging production system, how value is created now, and how it will be created in the future. And this is the main topic of this program called ISD. So there is specific focus on IPR, because IPR also will evolve substantially because the way value creation system will evolve. The argument is, since there are different arguments for the importance of this topic, first one is that our analysis is fundamentally based on traditional space like the firm. Usually, what we teach our student, at least I'm in management, so we teach always the company accounting system for one organization. But we know absolutely, and of course, the geography economics also provide a very interesting input to this, that value is created more and more in ecosystem, and the firm alone cannot do anything. And thanks to digital revolution, there are new value production system appear, and transaction is just, in economics, transaction is the core of value. You know, if there is no transaction, even in accounting system, if you look, for instance, accounting rules, they are trust only what is the subject of a transaction. For instance, if you take intangible, we can capitalize only those intangible who have been the subject of transaction in the market. If you develop R&D, if you develop knowledge, we cannot put in the balance sheet because there is no trust in what you do internally. So basically, the rationale for reasoning is on transaction. But we see also that because of digital, most of the value is created not only via transaction, but more via links. This is the main argument. This is why this question of acceleration is coming, is that value production system, emerging value system are basically and fundamentally based on linking quickly, rapidly different value space. So that's basically the argument of my presentation. I like the topography of value space, and in one of my publications, I just try as an individual to see how the value is created actually. So we traditionally have this hierarchies, private hierarchies, traditionally large companies like General Motors, studied by Chandler and others. We have public hierarchies, but we, for different reasons, because of transformation of value and production system, we have more and more things coming outside the community aspect of it. And they distinguish between three types of communities. Constrained communities, which is basically the freelancers people. Quasi-organic communities, open source, for instance, and organic communities, villages, local communities, and so on. So we have two orders here. We have what they call the transaction order. I don't know if you see something here, but I don't see anything, but you know. So we have the market, basically, and we have the recognition sphere. So there is of course, we need the two. I don't say that the recognition order is predominant to transaction, but we need to equilibrate between them, and probably some people are navigating between the two. Some people might be employed by IBM, for instance, in large corporation in the day, and the evening they go to outside, and circulate the knowledge and so on. So these two orders are very important, and the intangible are in between everything. So transaction orders are basically based on exclusive intangibles, IPR in this case, but in community orders we have more common or joint asset between people, except probably for constrained communities where people are governed by transaction, but because transaction costs are so high, then they need to find a way of exchange. Now I'm back to, this is just not a introduction, I'm controlling for the time. So I'm going to ISD program, this international research program on digital transformation of firms. So the objective is basically to design the 2020 enterprise. So it is a very large program organized by different committee. I was coordinating the scientific committee. By the way, Peter Musberger was part of the scientific committee. And we have the strategy committee and organization committee and different committee. So this is the way this program is functioning. It's not just a contract dedicated to researchers. It is question posed by the business people and the scientific people. And the scientific committee has to control for what is produced and to the fact that the response by the scholars goes to the question posed by the business people. So we get 12 work package here, and you see that 5, for instance, is dealing specifically with space, time, and knowledge flow. And if you look at the research agenda, there is a very interesting contribution by Peter on this topic, and we get projects specifically dedicated to work package 5. The project funded roughly 35 projects worldwide. This is wave A, so mostly French, but we have 2 projects from outside, one from US and one from Korea. We want more internationally for wave B, so we have some names of university, Aachen University in partnership with Tsinghua, here Germany versus China, and also US universities and Meiji University in Japan, for instance. For wave C, we get also some top university worldwide from US, but also from outside. So the mapping of the program is basically funding according to different questions project in different parts of the world, but we pay very important attention to the fact that it should not be Western view of the world. We should have, at that time, the idea is to have at least Asia as key players scientifically in the program. Unfortunately, we didn't get any substantial proposals from south part of the world, so Latin America and Africa in this case. But for Latin America, it was always presented at the scientific committee, so we get colleagues from Brazil, for instance, as partners in the scientific committee. So this is the mapping. So we have also a collection with Springers. By the way, we get the help from our colleague here from Heidelberg for contact with editors. So what comes with this project, I go quickly with the project. There are basically 25 proposals organized around 7 topics: emerging business model, work coordination, open innovation, enterprise space and knowledge flow, social and ethical dimension use, and data, IPR, and specific to digital. So there are 25 proposals. I will not go through every one of these, but for instance, from emerging business model, what I can take here as very strong proposal is that there is an expansion of value creation spaces as a major trend driven by digital. In this sense, that compared to the past, it appears that value spaces for firms, because of thanks to digital, are extending massively, and that should be taken into account. For work coordination and digital use, for instance, proposal 6 say that digital technology is relatively neutral with regard to collaboration use, the use of digital, it depends how organization will leverage digital in this case. For innovation practice, internal collaboration on innovation can be far from straightforward, especially in context dominated by individual incentives. So in this case, individual incentives are very important for collaboration. We cannot say that digital, there is some general view that digital allow horizontal collaboration. No, it depends upon if the incentive system are aligned with this. And open innovation, joint collaboration platform, in this case, emerging competitive industries by means of ad hoc learning process, but there is also online collaboration. Online collaboration is possible and even efficient, which means that market collaboration might be also a very interesting option. That means vis-a-vis internal collaboration. For knowledge flow, in the digital economy, IT entrepreneurship require the creation of ad hoc space freedom. So because of digital, we need some institutional or incentive system for people to be entrepreneur in digital. And there is also a question of designing organizational process in order to take into account the flow of knowledge between different geographies. In this case, there has been a very interesting project between UK and China. And in order to take advantage of this open external source collaboration, the partner in UK has to increase substantially the competence of his partner in China. So that's a question of how to take advantage of space. For ethical dimension, why there are some hypotheses provided. For instance, the hypothesis of the end of privacy by general overexposure of individual is not confirmed. Individuals adjust their exposure behavior to storage policy by operator like Facebook. And also there is the question of learning and develop learning for the question of social interaction and so on. So for IPR, digitally generative native machine that produce spontaneous unexpected innovation often contributed by external developers, and network dependence simplified the tension involved in organizational enterprise. So data, IPR, and specificity are very important. So this is basically prepare the fact that we live in an ecosystem of data, and there will be very strong argument for some form of IPR taking into account the context of emergence of digital. So based on this, what is the outcome? Because basically what we had in this program is the fact that we need some, but because the sponsor of the program, they were expecting to have some, not only ad hoc project for each of the topic, but also some understanding on how they have to prepare themselves for the organization of the future. What they come from this 25 proposal are basically five dimensions. One, I already mentioned the fact that value space are extending dramatically because of thanks to digital. So for the managers, of course, that's a big topic because they are used culturally to be managed by the control. They want to control everything, but now the control in this context is different because if the value space are extending all the time, and by the way, not only value space is expanding, but also the statute and role of players is also unstable. And we will see it from when you compare ISD program with MIT program on the future of automobile and this concept of lean, we see that the two systems are quite different. Secondly, there is a tension between organicity and transaction. So it doesn't mean that firms are disappearing. It doesn't mean that transaction is dominant. It means basically that the management of tomorrow will be probably a management of tension between two dimensions. Organicity as a way was making people doing things, but also transaction as going to the market faster and on. There is also spatio-temporal structuration of companies, especially those of large nature, but also it might be also for what Halvarian called micro-multinational. It doesn't mean that only large company has to organize. It might be also a need that even startup have to take into account the spatio-temporal dimension of the way they produce value. And we have this question of liquidity organization. This concept of liquidity, just replication of what Bowman then has produced and put forward for the society. So from liquid society to liquid enterprise. And between these, we have this question that value is created by the fact that we produce link quickly and rapidly between different value space, hence the question, this idea of Acceluction. We had a benchmark in this program between, and we have benchmark which is in the ITs, there has been a major program sponsored by car manufacturers and led by MIT, but there are also some partners in North Africa. University of Sussex was one of the partners. And the idea at that time was, how should we organize and what are the conceptual key concepts for organizing in the future to be competitive. And of course, the idea is mainly coming from US vis-a-vis Japan, but the idea is that. So, and the key concept that came from that program was the question of lean production. But if you look at the lean production and you try to read it as a special concept, so basically the lean production for me is we have the OEM, the enterprise, large car manufacturers, and we have the suppliers and we have the client. But these are free spaces which are very clearly identified, and the rules are very identified, and the value is created basically by optimizing the flux of physical and somehow information between the free space. But the free space are very determined in terms of role, who is doing what, and so on. And the objective is basically half of human effort in factory, half of manufacturing spaces, and half of investment tools, half of engineering time, and half of new product time. So basically, it is a question of optimization. It is not a question of combining things. It is we have free spaces, and you have to optimize the link between the free spaces. That's basically the lean. If you go to sorry, I will skip this slide. Yeah. If you go to the new spaces, we still have the lean production spaces. So we have supplier, we have enterprise, we have client. So lean is still there, but we have emerging new spaces for value creation for firms. So on the one hand, we have the society. Society is the resources for firms. We have data, of course. We have mobility. There has been very interesting study done for this program by Hanyang University, my colleague Namja Shou, on how mobility is used in Korea for moving people and the equipment with digital in order to improve the way they are doing value. So they are here provide some statistic on how mobility is one of the axes of creating value via digital. Of course, the time of the people, so private time of people, of collaborator, social network, and we have also the entrepreneurship space. Why entrepreneurship is becoming now a very important topic here? Because of this deconstruction of organization link and outsourcing, networking, and so on. So therefore, taking a human perspective, we need entrepreneurship policy or strategy by firms in order to take advantage of this digital resources. On the other hand, we have competitors, what our colleague from US calling complementers, those who are providing complementary resources, and of course platform. Probably the most important things happening actually is the emergence of major platform and the platformization of business. So it means that basically platform are aggregation of resources, basically market resources, which pose a enormous problem from question not only of data, but employment, payment, and generation, and so on. So for the managers, because we are talking to the managers, for the managers, this topography of value space is really disturbing because they are used to control things, they are used to define rules, and now they have to move to something new, which is not controlling, but combining. And not only combining, but combining very quickly, fastly. And so there is a question of trade-off between these spaces in different, every function, every activity in the firm is now challenged by this. For instance, take the question of investment. Should I invest in internal resources for platform or outside? The question we discussed yesterday with Tracy about training. So this question is very interesting because in this case, the trade-off in Canada was that no training for the people. But you can also say that I have to develop some training program because if you'd like to go with the platform, I have to do something. So every policy now, every function, every activity within the firm, but not only in the firm, is challenged by this large enlargement of value spaces and the fact that these value spaces has to be taken into account in combinatorial natures, but also in terms of non-defined statute and instable role for every players. Even though this, of course, carrying manufacturers still doing lean production, and others are doing lean production. However, everyone is challenged actually with this value space. So taking this as sort of background, so we have two regimes actually, what I call the regime of liquidity. So liquidity of market, liquidity and stability of role, short time span, horizontality, and so on. On the other hand, we have the regime of solidity, which means that things are fixing resources versus making resources mobile, having specific resources vis-a-vis having market resources, long time space to be built versus short time, verticality versus horizontality. So the management of tomorrow, or in management today indeed, is more a question of managing tension between these dimensions. So that's very important. So some questions for the managers is, if you take the mobility fixity as one of the access protection, so what business model for mobile you use in enterprise? How can we turn mobility into an effective front office, for instance? That's very concrete things. How do we redeploy staff from fixed statute to mobile statute? What are the appropriate coordination mechanisms? If we take for market, platform resources, how do we make trade-off between on investment, legacy, internal team, and market resources? How do you manage question of IPR, and so on and so on? So for each of the dimensions, there are very deep and very important questions the managers has to solve, and that's not very easy question compared to what I've seen in the past. If you see, for instance, short time span versus long time span, so what is the time span of the company in terms of R&D, design, innovation, and so on? What is the short-term impact of acceleration of the company working climate, stress, employment relations, and so on? So we have seen in the presentation by Tracy yesterday that that's a really concrete thing, that there is a tension, there is stress for the employment relationship, and delivering is sort of, I would say, illustration, delivering as a manager principle is a sort of illustration of this tension between we have to go shortly to the market instead of building something for the future. So that means that the arbitrage between future and now is, and the manager often they make the trade-off for now instead of the future. So, and this question of incentive system is also very important. For this program, we developed a scenario. So we had 6 scenarios. One is called Polyspace. One is Back to the Basics, Mesospace, Platform, Network Abundance, and Resistant to Digital. Polyspace means that things are going on like today, which means we have different value space, market, internal, and so on. Back to the basics, that's not plausible, but we can consider it at least intellectually. That means that firms might have a fatigue vis-a-vis the market, and the internalized, it might happen. Mesospace means that we go to mesospaces where we combine resources from the firm, from SMEs, from universities, and so on, and create a sort of a discover of a cluster process. That's the way. And we have the platform. And of course, actually, network abundance is the fact that data will be the ecosystem of a firm, and resistant to digital means that the society will reject all this, what one French economist called domestication. There is a question of now, as you know, we are in the process of domestication. We move from villages where people are free to the office, and now digital are domesticating everybody. So we are all domesticated as human beings. So then maybe one day people say, stop, we have to do other things. So maybe there will be sort of reject. This idea, by the way, is coming. This idea is not from me, it's from the business people. They say, look, imagine that tomorrow society is rejecting digital. What will happen to our business? So that's very interesting. But actually, the dominant scenario is, of course, the platform one. That's so for each of the scenario, we defined this, for instance, for platform, 20 enterprise find its digital strategy heavily dependent on its own platform strategy. Innovation are organized and articulated around this global scale platform, and the platform structure becomes the hub around which most digital activity are organized. Acceluction plays an important role in here, a link between platform and their client partners, as well as with users, establishing profile, service offering, and so on. So the platform scenario is already there, and of course we discussed this yesterday, I think with Peter and also with Hugo about this question of power platform, taking a very geopolitical issue, which is, as you know, for major platform, US has platform, China has platform, but Europe has not platform, and the other don't have platform. So the platform is not only a question of digital, it is a question also of geopolitical and the power. By the way, platform is not only a question of geopolitical, it's a question of survival for state because of the fiscal issues and so on and so on. So the debate, for instance, in Europe about fiscal aspect for the platform is not only a political issue, it is also sort of resources availability for the slack for the state to do offense. This, if you take this as a background and you consider that value in the future will be created by production, by accelerated production of link between different value space, that transaction is still there, but we have different role stable for players. So we have different questions to handle. One is better integrate time to accelerated dimension. That's very important. For instance, if you take concretely patent are for 20 years. But 20 years is time span very long. So might be that some innovation, especially in service innovation, we don't need necessarily patent. We might have, of course, there are utility model, which is small patent. But anyway, we need to take into account this time dimension. The question of individual asset is a really very important issue, which means that if you think that people, a lot of people will be orphaned tomorrow from organization, they will be in between. So then we need some instrument for them. We need to define some assets so I can move from organization way A to B or in between, but I need to have some asset to valorize. How do you define joint community assets? So those assets either transactional or organic. So we have to define some of these assets in order to make things maybe moving more quickly. How to take account the platformic dimension, including with regard to rent generation and sharing. That's we see in the literature that many discussions actually about the platform as a sort of natural monopoly. They take rent, and therefore they don't share the rent with others, including with those their employees. So there are debate, there are movement in different countries vis-a-vis large platforms. So from taking a political and societal point of view, the question of sharing rent is really very important, and the question of equality is also behind that. And we cannot have a world surviving without taking into account this very major issue of platform. Of course, big data and also innovation mechanism in situation when role link is stable. So if there are role unstable and we have quick links, what is the question for innovation policy for public sectors and so on? So that's maybe among the question, and I think I will stop here. And thank you very much.